Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. To support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys, head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
Feels good. Feels good. Like a cup of Dracula blood. Feels good.
Indeed, like a delicious, warm, room temperature cup. Chalice, really, of Dracula
sticky blood. Hey, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
My name is David Bell.
My name is Tom Ryman.
And we just watched Renfield. It's where Ren fairs happen, right?
Yeah,
am I right?
It's the fields where Wrens happen.
Yeah, that's a joke.
The fields where I died. No,
that's an X-Files.
That's an X-Files.
Where am I? What's going on?
Renfield, bringing innocent victims. I want a handful of nuns, a busload of cheerleaders.
And I just want a normal life again.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
All right,
we did that already, Dave.
Okay, so just to start, big thank you to Barry Tumeth. Barry Tumeth is our Patreon producer who made this happen. They thrust their finger at us and said, "I would like you to do Renfield."
They compelled us, as it were.
Yes. This was originally going to come out Monday.
Renfield.
Yeah. This was going to come out Monday, and then my cat fucked up his eye. Nobody needs to know this. So this counts as Monday. Let it be known. This counts as our Monday. Because this is also a new movie. So we're covering a new movie with a Patreon producer, Barry Tumeth. Again, thank you, Barry Tumeth. I think I know why they wanted us to cover this, because of the liberal use of ska.
In the opening, yeah, there's a lot of ska.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ska jokes in the very beginning.
Yeah, this is Nicolas Cage as Dracula, Renfield.
Nicholas Holt as Renfield. Yeah.
Double Nicks.
It's two Nicholases. Although only one of them has an H. Nicolas Cage gets the H out. It's an action adventure comedy about Renfield in modern day, still serving as Dracula's familiar. You guys saw the trailer. It's fun.
Yeah. And I remember I was a little eye squinty about the trailer.
Yeah.
Like the weird kung fu and shit. So what did you think of Renfield?
This is interesting. I really didn't like the first half. Or rather, maybe not the first half, but like the first half hour. Like I didn't like Act 1, but as soon as it hits Act 2, I was really on board. And like the back half of this movie especially, I really enjoyed. So like overall, I thought this was a really fun movie, and I thought it was surprisingly well written in the back half anyway. I thought the comedy was actually the weakest part of the movie.
Yeah. So my thoughts on this movie is that I think it was okay. I didn't hate it. I'm not mad at it.
No.
I agree. The comedy. I want to talk about that. I was watching with Hannah, and her note was like, "Was this script from 10 years ago?" Because it does have that vibe. And in fact, I looked up the making of it, and it was pitched as "we want to do what we do in the shadows," and that right away is like, well, that's a red flag.
Yeah,
because my feeling of it.
Screen story by Robert Kirkman, and it was produced by Skybound. So it's like, oh,
right. And it's like, and again, like, if your pitch is let's do this other thing that already exists, then that's not great, or at least that's how it was described in the papers, in the papes. When it was first getting developed, it was being developed like 2018-ish.
I could see, and I remember when this got announced too. I was actually still working at Collider when this project came together, so we were like tracking it. I could see the elevator pitch for this being What We Do in the Shadows meets Hot Fuzz.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that because this also feels like multiple films crammed into 90 minutes.
A little bit. I really did like the back half of this movie a lot, and that the back half really feels cohesive to me.
Yeah,
like
well, it takes a lot of setup.
It does, and the setup is unfortunately the shakiest part, but the payoff is really good, I think.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I get what you're saying, which is the second half definitely starts going smoother. It's just generally like it felt like studio notes, right? It felt like someone was like, I want to do this thing about Renfield and Dracula, and then like, you know, a year of studio notes later, it's like, okay, and there's also these like cop sisters who's avenging their father's death, and like it felt like these notes compounding. It felt like it was like, oh, can we give like a you know, a sidekick situation, and then they did that, and they're like, well, we need that person to have an arc, and then they did that, and then like it kept like, you know, like it felt like a script that at some point in the development they should have just wiped it clean and started fresh.
I see
a little bit.
I see what you're saying. I'm gonna push back a little bit because Awkwafina in the movie, her character is the sort of sidekick character that you're referring to, but like she also serves a pretty important narrative function in the sense that she's the person that inspires Renfield to stand up to Dracula, and like the movie's built around that in a way that was like cohesive that I didn't expect. Like that's the trailer really makes it seem like the movie's going to be really irreverent, which it's pretty irreverent, but not as much as you might expect. And it really is a story about Renfield being trapped in this situation and just also in general, just being inspired to break out of an abusive cycle, or like to stand up to bullies or something. It's like the movie had a little bit more to say about that than I was expecting. Oh,
for sure. However, then what's the point of the support group? Because the original premise that they even show in it, but the idea is he's going to support groups for marks, which I thought was very fun. That was a great idea. So you'd think you could just have him be inspired by the support group, right? To do that. And so like,
yeah, you could have, but I think having the Awkwafina's character be a cop allows a window into sort of the action adventure portion of it. And I do appreciate that it's kind of like Fight Club, where at first he's visiting the support groups in a way that he's deliberately not getting help from it. Like
he's doing it in a bad faith.
He's swimming around in it in bad faith. Like he thinks he's doing a good thing because he's listening to all these people's stories, and it's a support group for people who are stuck in abusive relationships. So he's just kind of going to the support group to listen to these people's sob stories, and then he's targeting their abusers as people he's going to go feed to Dracula. And it's a very cynical and not helpful way to view that resource, not just for himself, but also like he thinks he's helping those people, but he's really not.
Exactly. The idea is that's not how you help it. You help these people by helping them break away from the cycle.
Right.
And I just think like, couldn't that have been done if the inciting incident was he targets one of the people in there, and like they do, but make that person be the actual character, because they have to like do this double dip thing where then this other person
sort of like a
in.
double exposition dump in a bit. I will say that Awkwafina's exposition, there's not that much of it, and it's deployed decently okay.
There's some clunkiness.
There's a little bit of clunkiness, but not as much as I might have expected. Like they really didn't flesh it out any more than it needed to be fleshed out.
Yeah, there were parts where when she's talking to her FBI sister, and that's the big FBI, the exposition dump, where I was just like, okay, so like there was a chunk of the movie where I was just like, all right, are we gonna do Dracula stuff again? Like this is a cop movie all of a sudden. Which honestly, that cop idea, basically a traffic cop and their FBI and her FBI sister, are avenging the death of their father. That could have been its own movie that honestly would have been pretty good, I thought. But like stuff like the sister involved, where it was like, do we need another character at this point?
That was a bit much. But I think there was something to having Awkwafina be specifically a police officer who's stuck in a corrupt system. Her father was a police officer that was killed by the gang, the Ben Schwartz gang that runs New Orleans. We're going to talk about Ben Schwartz a lot. He delivered my genuine laughs in the movie.
For sure.
Because it mirrors the Renfield, or not necessarily just the Renfield story, but the idea of being trapped in the thrall of an evil creature pretty neatly in a way that you might not think, where she's like sort of stuck in this situation where the Sisyphean task of pushing a boulder up the hill, and she knows it's impossible because the whole system is against her, but she has to keep doing it. There was something about that storyline that dovetailed nicely with the idea of being trapped in the thrall of a vampire, but still trying to do the right thing, even though you know it's futile.
That's not a bad idea. Maybe she should have been at the support group.
Right. I was just saying it's not out of nowhere to introduce this cop story. It does mirror what Renfield is going through. But I see what you're saying. Like, it would have been more efficient to have her be a member of the support group.
For me, there's a sweatiness to the plot itself and cramming a lot into 90 minutes where it's like, you're right, is maybe they could have pruned it and kept the same elements. To me, it just felt like it was starting to get more and more bloated, and in a way that did get awkward at times. Like, for example, a great sequence where he tears all the people apart in the apartment complex is then followed by them casually like sitting and talking about their background. That's the shit where I'm like, oh, this exposition scene is crammed in here because it just has to be here. And where she's telling him, like, you're not the bad guy. And it's like, in the previous scene, you were just reacting about how you just did the worst thing you've ever seen.
Right. And she was also literally telling him that's like, you're not, like, he says, I'm not such a bad guy to her. And she's like, yeah, you're worse than that. You're not a hero or a villain. You're just some guy that randomly kills people for somebody else.
Right.
Like, you're worse than a villain.
Right. And so it feels like there's this idea of like, we wanted to do a lot of stuff in 90 minutes. And like this movie did not succeed. It didn't do great at the box office. That is to say, again, I didn't hate it or anything, but I do think it did not work ultimately. I guess is my thought on it. And I think part of it has to do with just this like really like overstuffed plot that I do agree that like the thematic elements are there and they're good. And I think there was a, like, for sure that was necessary and that's a thoughtful thing to do, you know?
Yeah.
I just think like either it's studio notes or something. It just feels like it's definitely been like draft, like second, third, fourth, fifth draft over and over again, studio noted to death is the impression I got from it.
Maybe. I don't know that I necessarily totally agree with that, because it still feels, I mean, there's some elements of it, but like the core beats of the story still connect in a logical way for me, where like it begins with Renfield. Okay, he's in Dracula's thrall and he's going to the support group to find victims because it helps him feel like he's pushing back against Dracula to be a better person without him actually pushing back against Dracula to be a better person. And then
that's a great idea.
And then he gets stuck in a situation where he tries to stand up to Dracula, but he gives Dracula like bad victims, like the victims he's been culling from this support group from their abusers. And Dracula's like, these people are shit. I want like good people because they taste better. So he's like, he's beaten down at this bar, and that's when he meets Awkwafina, and he sees that she stands up to Ben Schwartz, who is this notorious gangster, against all odds. Like she's gonna get shot in the face. There's like 19 guys there. It's hopeless, but she still sticks up for him, and that inspires him. And he goes back to his support group with renewed purpose. And he uses their book to try to stand up to Dracula. But when he does try to stand up to Dracula, because he's a meek person, that's like part of his personality. Like his arc is that he goes from being a meek coward to taking control of his life and being a good person.
Right.
But also because Dracula is Dracula and he's terrifying. He is ultimately, he's not able to stand up to Dracula, and Dracula realizes where the book comes from. He goes to a support group and kills everyone. It's like that, and that's the first half of the movie. Like that's all, to me, that's all like logical beats that you would hit in this narrative progression for this character's arc. So that's like the bones of it don't feel studio noted to death to me, because they still sort of follow a logical progression.
Well, here's the thing. You were saying that you liked the first half, or the first act was lost you, and then the second part. So when he kills the support group, shouldn't that be around the third act? Wouldn't that be like the really dark thing he does? And that's what I mean is like
it's the end of end of Act 2, isn't it?
Is it?
It's about like the 45-50 minute mark, so it might be a little earlier than that.
It's probably the halfway point, but I imagine.
It comes after, it is his lowest point, because it comes after he's been inspired to like change his wardrobe and change his life and get an apartment for himself and be his own person, and then Dracula drags him right back down to earth by killing his whole support group.
Right.
He's like, don't you dare do that again.
Yeah, and I like that entire arc. I felt like it was all rushed. Like the part where he gets the apartment and changes his clothes.
That montage
like
was
30 seconds.
real brief. Yeah, that was a kind of a clunky montage for sure.
And maybe, honestly, if they could keep it all, if they just made the movie a little longer. Like I always appreciate 90 minutes. But that
this movie is 90 minutes with credits. Like, it's really about 83 minutes.
Which, again, that feels like a studio thing. No one wants to... Like, that feels like a studio thing in that it feels like the studio's like, come on, rush, like, speed it up.
Yeah.
And, like, that's the stuff where it's like, I don't know, maybe this should have been hour 45 to 2, to be honest. Because you're balancing these multiple plots. I get that it's a comedy and it's supposed to be light. But... this is what, going back to, like, it just feels like a lot happens in a very little amount of time, that they're balancing all these ideas. Because then we have the crime family who's working with the cops, who has like the cop computer at first.
Well, there's the idea is that they're Dracula, but they're the mortal version of Dracula. Like,
right.
They are a secret underworld entity that has outsized influence. They have so many familiars, as it were, spread across the city. So it's like,
they're not that secret. The boss shows up on the street at the end in broad daylight with the cops. Not in broad daylight, in the middle of the street to like fight. Which
right, but
made me laugh.
And Ben Schwartz does the same thing earlier, where he takes his mask off in the club. Like, I think it's kind of funny, but like, I think that's on purpose, right? To demonstrate the level of power that this crime family has. It doesn't matter because we see that he takes his,
they own this town,
right? When he takes his mask off in the bar to kill Awkwafina, and then Renfield saves everybody, and there's like a whole room full of witnesses, including him. We do see in a later scene that they all recant their testimonies except for Renfield,
right?
So it's like I see that it's funny, but it's also demonstrating the power they have over the city, which parallels perfectly the power that Dracula has over people. Like, I don't think it's that weird.
I just think it's all kind of overstuffed, where there's this crime family plot, which I get that it has, like you're saying, it is the idea of the modern, or the, like, that's the reason at the end Dracula teams up with them.
Right.
Like,
and
that makes sense.
That is a really funny scene where he recruits Ben Schwartz.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what made me laugh the hardest, actually. There's a scene where Ben Schwartz and his guys stumble into Dracula's lair, and he beats them all up and flies off to terrorize Renfield and kill his support group. But then he comes back, and Ben Schwartz is just waking up. But he realizes that Ben Schwartz is like this crime guy who is pretty powerful and connected. So he starts asking him questions about his family. It's like, would you be into like decapitating your enemies and impaling them and shit? And Ben Schwartz is like, yeah, that's like what we're about.
Yeah.
So he like recruits him at the end, and he ends up turning him into his new familiar and turning all of his men into familiars as well. But there's a great, this is the part that made me laugh the hardest in the whole movie, is where Dracula starts laughing really creepily and intense. And it's a trope. It's a trope we've seen 1,000 times in action movies and horror movies. The bad guy is talking to a subordinate, and they seem to land on something that delights him, and they laugh, and like the subordinate starts laughing uncertainly, and they're both laughing, and then all of a sudden the bad guy will just kill him. It's a trope we all have seen 100 times. So they're doing this trope in the scene, and like Ben Schwartz stops partway through it as Dracula's laughing, and he's like, "Are you happy, or are you gonna fuck me up?"
Yeah, I like that line.
I laughed so hard, Dave.
I do want to talk about the humor aspect, because one thing, so I said this was okay. I didn't hate this movie, and the performances are great. Nicolas Cage is doing great.
Cage is really good. There's a couple of scenes where he's being Cage, but like most of the time,
but that's what they want. That's what you
right.
For,
but
you know?
I appreciate that. Like most of the time, he's trying to be classic Bela Lugosi Dracula.
Yeah, I would though argue that, and I don't know the intricacies. I don't know what's improv. It feels like it's funny despite the script at times.
Right.
And what I mean is it has a huge heaping of Joss Whedon. It has a bad case of, well, that just happened. And in fact, I believe someone says a line similar to that. So, and here's one of the things I loved about the movie was the absurd gore, right? Great. So much fun. So much fun, the gore. But like this, the scene that like perfectly explains the problem is the priest scene where they're he's like, it's like a flashback where a priest has trapped Dracula, and Renfield helps Dracula. The priest is like, "You damned us." Dracula flies into the priest's mouth, and the priest explodes.
Yeah.
Very funny. And then the voiceover says, "I was not expecting that." And it's like, no, that's the joke, you assholes. Yes, we weren't expecting that. You don't have a character say it. And that's what it is that there's a bit of that. There's a lot of like, there's the let's back up to the beginning. There's the like, how did I get here thing.
That's my biggest gripe about the movie, and I said it up top. But like the first half hour of this movie is not good, which is a shame because I enjoy the rest of it. But I could see people dropping this movie in the first 30 minutes because it is a lot of like
100%.
Well, I bet you're wondering how I got here. And I actually didn't hate the bit with the priest exploding where he says, "Well, I didn't expect that," and then it builds to Dracula getting burned badly by sunlight, and a second later he's like, "I didn't expect that either," because the scene with the voiceover removed is not funny.
Right.
Like the scene is pretty. I don't want to.
It's funny that the priest exploded.
It's funny that it's funny that the priest explodes. Yeah, to you and I because we're ghouls. But I'm just saying, like the scene is not the scene itself. Outside of Nicholas Holt's narration, is not played for laughs. Like it's kind of like a horror scene that's happening.
Yeah, I think there's an absurdity though.
There's a bit of it, yeah,
with
for sure.
Awkwafina being like, "Did I just see you cut off that guy's arms?" And it's like, "Yeah, we all saw it. Don't say it. For the love of God, don't comment on the things you just saw." Movie, I'm begging you. When a thing happens in a movie, have someone react to it, but not go, "Is that what just happened?" Like that stuff just drives me nuts.
Yeah, that's the worst. It's the worst for sure. For sure.
And again,
I appreciate them trying a variation of it by saying, "Well, I didn't expect that to happen," but
right.
like I do recognize that it's the same joke, and it's being deployed for the same purpose, which is to undercut the severity of what you just saw.
Yeah, and to just point out the thing, that they did. Because again, I do think the gore in this stands on its own.
It's very funny. Like it's very silly gore.
Yeah, it's over the top. It's literally ripping off someone's arms, beating them to death with it via Dead Alive. But Dead Alive doesn't have the character go, "Oh my God, did you just do that?" So it's like, just let the gore be campy, just let the gore be the gore that it is. And it seemed like that always happened around the gore too, which is at least when I noticed it the most.
I feel like I feel like that's like nerve. That's where I feel studio notes the most, because that feels the most like a nervous person not knowing, like seeing these buckets and buckets of blood and not knowing whether or not it's funny.
Right. I think there's an element of like they were trying to make kind of a B movie idea in a mainstream situation. And so I think they were definitely confined by certain rules or certain notes that were kind of nerfing it. I'm glad they didn't nerf the gore. And so like, again, it's not bad. It just overall, in the end, this is one that's going to kind of run through me, you know?
Yeah. I will say this movie doesn't feel nerfed to me. It maybe feels nerfed to me in one sense, and that's the very last scene where he uses Dracula's blood to resurrect his support group.
Oh, yeah, I guess it's a different version of nerfed. It's not nerfed like taking the edge off. I was thinking nerfed in that like taking like a really weird idea and trying to normalize it more and more, if that makes sense. Or the idea of making it feel more accessible as a niche like B movie, while still not like keeping it R-rated. It's nerfed might not be the right word, but it's making a weird movie. You know, this is a movie.
Weird movie, and I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, but like, so when we do our Friday nights, we watch a lot of weird movies that ran through systems or studios, and that's kind of what it reminds me of. Movies like fucking, we just watched Heartbeeps, the Andy Kaufman movie.
Oh man,
that feels like a movie that at one point was something different than it was. You know what I mean? Where then you watch it and you're like, what a weird artifact. This gives me those vibes. Obviously, it's better than Heartbeeps because that movie's a fucking nightmare. But you know what I mean? Where it's like, I think there was a level of weirdness in mind originally.
For sure. This is a weird idea.
Yeah.
It's a weird idea to make a movie about the character Renfield.
Yeah. And it's like, there's a lot of moving parts. And I don't know if it had enough to breathe. Like him eating the insects is that explained in the is that like a thing? Is that Renfield's thing?
I mean, he
eats insects and gets superpowers?
No, he just eats them.
Okay, yeah, they say like don't ask, like they hand wave it.
Well, actually, excuse me. Actually, they do explain it. Which I appreciated this because it actually made sense, and it sort of seemed to, like, if this was a part of vampire mythology, like it seems to, it's acceptable to me. Like he explains, well, Dracula gets his power by drinking human blood. I get a portion of his power by consuming lesser animals like insects. And that honestly made sense to me.
Make sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
It made more sense than I was expecting, and they explained it in a sentence.
Yeah.
So I actually really appreciated that.
You spoke of the ending. The one other note I had with the ending is, you're right. I didn't mind him bringing everybody back.
Neither did I. That was just like a thing that I could point to as being the closest thing to like a nerf that the movie does, because I was really impressed by the fact that Dracula does a terrible thing. It's not like a movie that like tries to nerf what like the hero's low point is. It's like Dracula comes in and kills his entire support group like halfway through the movie. You're like, oh shit, right. Okay. Like he really punishes Renfield for pushing back against him.
Right. And now that we talk about it, it is kind of wishy-washy to bring them back. But again,
but like it kind of kept in a tone with the movie, and I was happy.
That's the thing. The tone of the movie is a lot more playful.
Yeah.
And again, I that's why that's the imbalance I kept sensing a little bit, where it's like the Joss Whedon jokes with like super gore and then really dark things happening that also get taken away. I also felt like the arc at the, like, I loved the chopping up Dracula shit. That was fun as hell.
And putting him in ice cube trays with concrete and dumping him in the
that
sewer.
was-
And he's
that
like,
was-
I don't know
that
if
was
this,
great.
I don't even know if this is going to kill him, but I know that it's going to take him a long time to recover
Yeah.
from it.
But the initial idea of overcoming Dracula, he just sort of beats him up. You know, like the actual scene where he defeats him.
It's the scene, it's his emotional defeat of Dracula, because Dracula is not physically defeated at that point. Like that's
Right.
Like he's punching Dracula in the face after having ripped Dracula's fangs out, but he immediately regrows his fangs. And
Right.
he's just like he's just saying, I deserve to be loved, I deserve to be appreciated. It's him breaking free of the relationship in that moment. So that's what
For
it's more
sure.
about. Like it's because Dracula does still fucking knock him up off of him and throw him across the room, and then it's Awkwafina's quick thinking by making a spirit barrier ring out of cocaine that actually traps him and defeats him.
Right.
So I didn't mind that as much. Like as it was happening,
guess
I was
what
a little concerned, but when it became clear that it was primarily about Nicholas Hoult being able to have power over Dracula in that situation and force Dracula to listen to him about what he's saying. Like he's like, look, I need to be loved, I need to be respected, I need to be appreciated. Like, and that's the completion of Renfield's arc. So I didn't mind that as much, because it wasn't about him physically overpowering Dracula, because Dracula's weak in that moment when he's getting punched, but as soon as it only lasts about 30 seconds, and then Dracula knocks him off of him. He's like, get the fuck off me, I'm Dracula.
I just feel like there's a more clever way to have done that.
I think so,
because
too.
It's sort of
I think so,
completing an
too.
arc by just saying it. There's like one thing occurred to me is like this the thing about, you know, the abusive relationship and that ongoing arc was clear to me the whole movie, but I guess I never felt it as much. And something that occurred to me is he should have gone back, like briefly or something like that. It's there could have been more around that relationship if they really wanted to explore it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where like he could have like Dracula, because one of the things they do is Dracula's blood heals him, so he's dependent for his survival, and so there could have been a moment where like he gets really fucked up and Dracula heals him and like brings him back to full health, stuff like that, where like that would have been
Well, that
like
happens.
if it was like. No, I mean like third act, like the idea
yeah.
that, yeah, like along with, I don't know. It's, I think it's the stuff that's still itching at me is just how kind of rushed it was to explore that with this subplot of like this mob family and these sisters avenging their father, and them like teaming up with Dracula in the span of, I guess, less than 30 minutes. Like my overall impression is still like this just felt weirdly paced to me, and it felt like they weren't able to like really explore the themes as much as they could have.
I agree with the second part. I don't think it's weirdly paced, but I do agree that they sort of had to really speed through it, because they do have the scene where he goes back to Dracula, but it's sort of all encapsulated in the scene where he shows up back at his apartment as he's leaving a message for Awkwafina asking her to dinner, and Dracula's sitting in there. And then Dracula in that scene, that's the scene where he berates Renfield into being submissive again, and then he flies off and kills the support group. Like that's the scene where he like goes back to Dracula, but it is sort of, it's so condensed and it happens so quickly. It would have been more profound if they were able to explore those themes with a little bit longer runtime. Like if this was an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah, or again, if it was just two different movies. I do think it was weirdly paced. The example I already gave was that fight scene in the apartment, and then there's an urgency implied in that fight scene, and then it cuts to them both sitting down talking because they needed to do the exposition. Like that's weird pacing to me, which is like, okay, we're off to the races. He just killed a bunch of people in this apartment complex. We're in Act 3, shit's going down, and then it's like, let's stop and sit and talk for the next scene.
Well,
and it's the weirdly like adverse to like what we had just seen, like because it felt like we needed the scene to be there. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I don't agree that it's weirdly paced. I agree that it's weirdly staged, because like The reason they're sitting and waiting is because Awkwafina is waiting to hear back from her FBI sister. So they should have been in hiding, like in a weird motel, or like they should not have been in public having a meal. Like, that's weird.
You're right. They could have. You're right. They could have saved that scene easily if they were like hiding out, and if they were, the tone was better. So you're right. That's less pacing and more like.
Yeah, it's not the pace. It's more like where they are, like what's happening.
Yeah,
doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, they should be where like Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor were when they were hiding from the Terminator.
Right. Exactly. It's why did they do it that way? Because I'm trying to think of like what was the point of that? What happened in the scene after that? Was there a structural reason they felt the need to have them having fucking lunch after that?
Not really, because all that happens is that in that scene is they have a conversation at the table. Awkwafina gets a call from Ben Schwartz's mom, who is the crime boss, about, hey, we have your sister. And then Renfield at the same time gets a psychic call from Dracula taunting him. So that could have that could have happened in a motel room. There's no reason for it to be in public.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's so weird. It's very weird. I like that we're really breaking this this Renfield film up piece by piece here.
Listen,
but there is
there was a lot more thought to this movie than I was expecting, Dave.
I agree with you that there was a lot of thought in it, and I agree with you that the initial idea of it is clever, but I think this movie just has a lot going against it. And just to list it all again, the What We Do in the Shadows similarities, that's really tough to me because it's a neat idea. Codependency. Not codependent, but an abusive relationship between Renfield and Dracula. Well, like an obvious dynamic because that's what it is already. Doing a Dracula from Renfield's perspective as a servant, good idea. I think very good idea. In modern day world, good idea. The overall plot, going to the support group, like that's a good setup, right?
Yeah.
The idea of his arc just being to overcome and defeat Dracula. These are all great concepts, but I can see originally looking at an idea like that and going, well, is there enough for a movie? And then having to kind of add subplots in it to kind of stretch it out. And then the What We Do in the Shadows similarity just like really feels blatant to me because What We Do in the Shadows very much has the relationship between a familiar and the vampire, like throughout it, Right,
but it's very different. Like
it is very different.
It's not What We Do We Do in the Shadows is extremely broad. This movie is not.
For sure. It's still a good idea. I'm thinking in terms of like, what this had against it. And then the first act, like you're saying, is definitely
it's tough. It's
very clunky.
It's not a great introduction to the movie.
And like I think there's a lot of just across the page writing issues. Like the issue we just talked about, the conversation. I also believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember finding out way later that why he was like, so he does the support group stuff. And then it's like, it feels like it's revealed after the fact that he's going there for marks. You know what I mean? Like it.
No, it's revealed in the same scene.
In the support group?
Yeah, in that first support group scene, because it leads into him following.
Does he say in that, like in the narration, I'm going here to get their abusers?
Yes.
Because Okay, then I missed
because that scene leads directly into him going to the warehouse where the three guys who stole cocaine from Ben Schwartz are, because one of them is the abusive boyfriend of the woman we first listened to in that first scene.
Yeah, no, I got that. What I'm saying is, did he explain?
Yes, he says it.
That is the purpose for why he's there.
Yes.
In the first place. Okay. So he's been going through the support group, finding people, or it's his first time. Again, it really seems like that just should have been the idea. It should have been like, I'm going to the support group because I'm sick of finding innocent people. And when he goes there, the support group itself gives him that strength. That just feels like a lot more efficient, right? Because going to a support group for people dealing with narcissists and abusive relationships.
That would have been...
that would be the thing that makes the character go, I need to stand up to my boss. But it isn't.
That would have, yeah. And that for sure would have...
It's really weird.
Yeah. It for sure would have been the more powerful thing for his character, too, was to... Because he decides to go to this support group. So it would have been more powerful if a decision that he made is what... Rather than him randomly witnessing Awkwafina stand up to Ben Schwartz in a nightclub that inspires him.
It's really like that's
it's
the stuff
strange.
Where
it's weird. It's weird that Awkwafina wasn't in the sport group.
When they're trying to cram it all in 90 minutes, you'd think they'd want to be efficient. And that's not even like efficient in a way that takes anything away from it, you know? Because then it could also be the idea of Awkwafina. I'm still not sure why her sister was involved. That still baffles me. But then you could have Awkwafina talking about her boss, who's a cop. Like you could do it that way, where it's like he's talking about his boss, she's talking about her boss, something like that. I'm just spitballing here. It just feels like the movie is both trying to be really short and then also like not knowing where to be efficient.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that.
Yeah, there's an offness to it, to the story, to me. But like, I agree that the themes itself it's a good idea, you know. And again, the performances are great.
I think the themes are consistent. Yeah, I love Nick Cage. I like Nicholas Hoult in this movie. I think Awkwafina is fun.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
Yeah, everybody's doing a good job in this movie. Like Ben Schwartz is funny as shit. Like
of course,
I am. Yeah, like you were saying, you suspect like a lot the comedy on the page. There's something about the comedy on the page versus improv. I suspect the "Are you happy or are you gonna fuck me up?" line was a Ben Schwartz improv.
I could definitely see that being the case.
He is a well-known improv comic.
Right. Yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by this movie because I thought it was going to be watchable crap. Right. And to me, this movie is watchable. It's not crap. Like I thought the themes were consistent. I liked all the performances. The movie had it actually had a little bit to say that I wasn't expecting. So I think this is an entirely watchable, bloody action comedy. Yeah, it's just not the actual like written jokes aren't that funny, but like a lot of like reactions and weird like one-off lines are funny, and then of course all the violence is very funny. Yeah, like the blood's not even colored like real blood. Like it's supposed to be funny.
For sure. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I liked it okay. I probably won't watch it again anytime soon. In the back of my head, I still think this might be destined to be a Heartbeeps or a Dead Heat, and in the sense that like a movie that sort of gets lost for a while, and then you go back and you're like, when did this get made? You know what I mean? Where it's like, the fuck is this?
I think it's more of a Dead Heat, because Dead Heat is like a glorious discovery. You're like, oh, and this movie is out of its fucking mind and it's great.
And I would argue Dead Heat has that humor problem where you're like, I think that was supposed to be a joke.
Right. None of the jokes they wrote were funny, but like plenty of stuff that happens on screen is hilarious.
Exactly. Movie. Yeah, I think Dead Heat, because Dead Heat is another idea where they're trying to cram a lot of ideas into a movie where it's like, it's a zombie and it's also science, and you're like, and we're doing it really quick. And you're like, this is a lot. You're putting a lot in this movie. And a lot is happening.
And also
the pacing is a little weird.
Also,
and
it's Treat Williams and Joe Piscopo, which is a huge ask.
Yes, yes, they're asking a lot of us at any time in history. That's asking a lot. Dead Heat. Everybody watch Dead Heat. I didn't hate this. It's just it feels like one where the reviews and stuff, I'm like, that is exactly what I expected.
Right.
That makes sense.
Like this movie has like an average like 6 rating on IMDb, and that feels about right.
Yeah. It cost $65 million. It only made like $20 million.
Really?
Like, this is but again,
no, that's a lot of money.
Oh yeah, and they spent too much money making it for sure. But the 20 million, I could have told you that's how it would make. You know, back in the days of home video, that's where this movie would have been made for, right? This is like a Mannequin. You know what I mean? Where it's like, again, weird high concept comedy, which I'm not against.
Mannequin was in the theaters, Dave.
Oh, no. What I'm saying is Mannequin's the kind of movie. I haven't looked it up, but I'm guessing people weren't lining up to see Mannequin. That was a home video deal. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, movies
Renfield,
that do well on rental. Yeah.
Yeah, this
Austin
is a movie
Powers.
that. Yeah, this is a movie that I think was destined for rentals in an era where rentals are not a thing. I think that's an element. Like, I can see this finding an audience eventually, being a more of a cult classic. I'm just not that audience, but I can absolutely see this getting a fan base, you know?
Yeah, I'll watch this again.
Sure.
I enjoyed it.
I mean, I will eventually, but this for me, I'm filing this under like, I'll watch it again when I have forgotten the movie, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Where it's going to be 10 years for me, I bet.
Yeah, I bet you'll forget it quicker than that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Who knows?
Well, I don't have anything else, Dave.
No, it's fine.
All right,
fine movie.
that's a sode.
That's a sode. Barry 2 Math, thank you. We
Thank
barely
you.
talked about the ska, and I apologize.
Oh, that's fine. The ska jokes were all bad.
Yeah, ska is one of those where
It was
like,
real sweaty and obvious. It was like somebody trying to be current, but like from 6 years ago.
Yeah, I have to agree. Where the ska stuff felt forced, where they're like, ska is funny. We should talk about ska, and then someone did like a ska pass. Like that's what it felt like. Someone did a ska pass. They're like, we need a ska pass on this. Get us a ska pass.
That is what it felt like.
Yeah, they should do that on most things. I want Dune to have a ska pass. Now that's a movie that should have ska in it.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Right?
That's all they listen
right.
to on Arrakis.
Yeah. Oh my God. Fuck yeah. Listen, folks, this was through our Patreon, patreon.com/gamefully unemployed, GAMEFULOY unemployed. We love your support. We need your support. We crave it.
Yes,
if you
we
go on there
desire
for
it.
just $5 a month, you can access to a bunch of exclusive podcasts on there, like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Fox Mulder's a Maniac, Star Trek: The Next Futurama, and Spiel Boys. We also watch movies every Friday night. Movies like Heartbeeps and Dead Heat. Not selling the Friday nights, but I believe me, they're very fun. A lot of us get together.
Probably
we hang
eventually Renfield too.
out. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, check it out.
We also have a store. Head over to gamefullyunemployed.com where we have a link to our Teespring store where we have all kinds of cool original artwork and designs you can get on t-shirts, mugs, stickers, posters, all sorts of things. So slap your undead peepers onto that.
Absolutely do that.
All right.
And I don't know, blow up priests.
Eat bugs and blow up priests.
Eat bugs and blow up priests. Yeah.
Yep.
That's the way.